In the stately grandeur of my grandfather's mansion, a room filled with family members buzzed with a palpable sense of anticipation and unease. We were all gathered in the ornate drawing room, where the walls, steeped in history, seemed to resonate with the silent whispers of the past. Today, though, the atmosphere was different, charged with a tense mixture of sorrow and covert avarice as everyone settled into their seats. Among us were my Uncle William, exuding an air of smug confidence as he sat prominently near the front, my aunt, her features tight with anxiety, and my cousin Ava, her arms defensively crossed, her gaze sharp and calculating. The reason for our gathering was well known. My grandfather had left behind a substantial fortune, rumoured to be around $900 million. His legacy was a hot topic among us, each hoping to receive a fair share of his vast estate. Throughout his life, Grandfather had often spoken about fairness and his desire to ensure that all his loved ones were well cared for. He had reassured me multiple times, promising that his will would reflect his equitable intentions. So, despite the underlying tension, I felt a reassuring calm as we convened. I trusted that my grandfather had kept his word. However, as our family lawyer began the reading of the will, the room's atmosphere took a sharp turn. With a steady voice but an expression that hinted at unease, lawyer read through the formal legalities before making a startling announcement. "To my beloved son, William," he started, his voice faltering slightly, "I leave the bulk of my estate, including the Sinclair mansion, valued at approximately $100 million and a cash sum of $10 million. A stunned silence followed his words. A ripple of shock passed through the room. I could almost hear Aunt's sharp intake of breath. Disbelief washed over me. This revelation was incongruent with everything my grandfather had espoused. William had been distant from the family for many years and had rarely visited Grandfather in his final days. His smug smile now seemed to revel in the surprise and dismay that his unprecedented inheritance provoked among the rest of us. It made no sense. Grandfather had always appeared more supportive of Ava's academic pursuits and my own involvement in the charity work he cherished. He had never shown any particular favouritism towards William. Yet, here we were, hearing of a will that concentrated the vast majority of his estate on him. As lawyer continued, the lesser bequests were outlined. Aunt received a modest country home, Ava a small trust fund, and I was granted a mere $210,000, a paltry sum compared to what was bestowed upon William. The room filled with a heavy silence as the gravity of the situation settled around us. I couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. The will didn't just diverge from Grandfather's often stated values, it completely contradicted them. Fueled by a mix of shock and a sense of injustice, I resolved to delve deeper. It was then I discovered unsettling discrepancies and outright fabrications that pointed to one harrowing conclusion. The will had been tampered with and my uncle's deception was at the heart of it. This realization marked the beginning of a challenging journey to uncover the truth and restore the integrity of my grandfather's final wishes. Ava was on the other side of the room when it happened. The shock on her face mirrored my own as disbelief and anger washed over us. She finally broke the silence, her voice shaking with rage. "Grandfather promised me part of the estate, that we'd all be treated equally. William doesn't deserve everything," she said firmly. Aunt, standing beside her, paled but nodded in agreement. "He told me the same. He wouldn't have left us out like this." William, who had been quietly listening with a smug grin, finally spoke. "Really, now, everyone," he began, his voice oozing condescension. "Father trusted me to manage the estate. Being his eldest son, it's only logical that I inherit the majority." I felt a wave of anger at his arrogance. He had never been there for Grandfather, or for any of us, appearing only when he stood to gain something. "Natural," I retorted, my voice low and filled with contempt. Grandfather was always about fairness. He made sure to tell me he'd look after us all. "This isn't fair, William. It doesn't make sense," William shrugged, unaffected by our protests. The will is legally binding. Argue all you want, but it changes nothing. I turned to the lawyer, searching his face for any sign of hope, any loophole through which we could challenge this apparent injustice. But he only shook his head, his expression sympathetic, but resigned. The will was properly signed and witnessed, he explained. Unless you can prove foul play, there's little to be done. Foul play. The words echoed in my mind, igniting a flicker of hope. I remembered my conversations with grandfather, the promises he had made. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story than we knew. As the family dispersed, each lost in their thoughts, I pulled Ava aside. I don't believe this, I whispered fiercely. I can't believe grandfather would change his will like this. We need to find out what really happened. Ava nodded, her expression grim. I'm with you, Michael. He was sick, but he was in his right mind. This doesn't make sense. Together, we made a silent pact to uncover the truth. I had no idea where this path would lead or what secrets we might unearth, but I was determined not to let William take everything without a fight. Grandfather had taught me to stand up for what was right, to protect what mattered, and this legacy, this family, fractured as it was, mattered. The next day, I began my investigation. I started with grandfather's closest friends, the ones he confided in, who knew him best. I spent hours going through old letters, journals, anything that might give a clue about what really happened in those final weeks. The more I searched, the more I became convinced something was wrong. This will, this distribution, it didn't align with the man I knew, who had raised me with a sense of fairness and integrity. I began to suspect William. I recalled whispers over the years, rumours of debts and shady dealings, but he had always managed to slip away unscathed using his charm and connections. Ava and I met frequently over the next few days, piecing together what little we had. She had uncovered some questionable transactions in grandfather's accounts, payments made to unknown entities in the months before his death. Subtle, easily overlooked, but suspicious enough to make us dig deeper. Finally, after days of searching, we found what might just crack the case wide open. As we dug through the heaps of financial records, we stumbled upon a pivotal piece of evidence, a letter handwritten by my grandfather, addressed to his lawyer, dated just weeks before his death. In this letter, grandfather articulated clear intentions for his estate, vastly different from those declared at the will reading. He had expressed a strong wish for the estate to be divided equally among his children and grandchildren to secure everyone's future. There was no indication of favouring William, nor any suggestion that the rest of us should be excluded. This letter was the proof we needed. It suggested that something had gone terribly wrong. Armed with this letter, I confronted the lawyer, who turned pale as he read the document. I don't understand how this happened, he stuttered, clearly disturbed. The will I read was the only one I had on file. This changes everything. It dawned on me then just how profound the deceit was. William had manipulated the situation, altering grandfather's will to benefit himself at the expense of everyone else. I felt a surge of anger, but underneath that was a firm resolve, a determination to right this wrong. I knew confronting William would be fraught with risk. He would deny everything and try to manipulate the facts. Yet, holding the letter, I felt empowered, buoyed by a sense of justice that fortified my resolve. I was determined not to let William tarnish our grandfather's legacy or take what wasn't rightfully his. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment to stand up, not just for myself, but for my entire family who had been wronged. The deeper I delved into our family's past, the more I unravelled a maze of secrets, each more convoluted and sinister than the last. The discovery of grandfather's letter had only intensified my suspicions that there was more to the story. I needed to understand why grandfather would have allowed such drastic changes to his will, and what role William had played in those critical weeks. It wasn't long before I learned that William had been visiting grandfather quite frequently in the months leading up to his death, ostensibly to help manage his affairs. At the time, those visits seemed innocuous, but now they appeared to be a part of a darker scheme. William's strategy to influence our vulnerable grandfather. I wasn't alone in my suspicions. My younger brother had been present at the will reading, quietly observing everything with a thoughtful expression. Known for his reticence, brother was more of an observer, but he was far from naive. He too had noticed the smug satisfaction on William's face and seemed to have reached similar conclusions. When I shared the letter and my concerns with brother, his response was swift and resolute. "I knew something was off," he said, his eyes hardening with anger and resolve. William's always had a knack for manipulating situations to his advantage, stepping on anyone in his path. If he influenced grandfather to change his will, it wasn't out of love or loyalty. It was purely for financial gain. Together, we decided to search grandfather's study, hoping to unearth more clues that would help us piece together the real story behind the changed will and expose the truth about William's machinations. The study had always been grandfather's sanctuary, a room filled with towering bookshelves, papers and mementos from his life. Now, as we rifled through his belongings in his absence, it felt odd yet necessary. Driven by a sense of duty, I was determined to uncover the truth and ensure his final wishes were honoured. As we opened drawers and cabinets, we uncovered a trove of old letters and documents, each revealing the complex web of relationships that had defined our family for decades. One letter, written by William just weeks before grandfather's death, particularly caught my attention. It wasn't overtly threatening, but the subtext was unmistakable. A veiled ultimatum to ensure the family legacy remained as he deemed fit. Though it didn't directly mention the will, the implication was clear. "This has to be it," brother murmured, peering over my shoulder. William was pressuring him. If grandfather was already weak, he might have complied just to avoid conflict. I nodded, the pieces beginning to fall into place. If William had coerced grandfather, then his control over the estate was founded on deception and manipulation. However, one letter wouldn't be enough to prove our case. We needed solid evidence of William's underhanded dealings. Then I remembered the old box of files grandfather had stashed in the attic. As children, he had shown them to us, a curious collection that seemed like nothing more than a family history. But now I suspected it might hold the key to William's schemes. Brother and I retrieved the dusty box, setting it on the study's desk to sift through its contents. Amid tax records, business transactions, and faded photographs, we finally found what we were looking for at the bottom of the pile: a series of financial records outlining William's engagement in dubious business ventures. These records were damning, showing how he had used the family trust as collateral for risky investments that had ultimately failed, costing the family millions. Yet, he had cleverly concealed the losses, maintaining the appearance that the trust was intact. It was outright fraud. As we continued to dig deeper, another set of transactions emerged tied to Uncle Henry, another of grandfather's brothers. Known as the black sheep of the family, always down on his luck and asking for loans, here was proof in black and white that Henry had been siphoning money from the family trust for years, covering his debts and funding his extravagant lifestyle at the family's expense. Brother shook his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "All these years they've been bleeding us dry, and grandfather never said a word." "Maybe he didn't know," I suggested, though a deep sense of betrayal churned within me. Or perhaps he thought he could manage it. Either way, the revelation was bitter, realizing that those who were supposed to protect and support us had been exploiting us instead. But this was just the beginning. There were more secrets lurking, waiting to be uncovered. Over the next few days, Brother and I meticulously documented every piece of evidence, every transaction, every letter. We built our case slowly, solidifying proof that William had manipulated Grandfather, resorting to blackmail and deceit to secure his position as the primary heir. But as we neared the truth, the stakes felt increasingly perilous. It was clear that William and likely Uncle Henry would stop at nothing to protect their secrets and maintain their ill-gotten gains. The tension between us simmered, a growing resentment that seemed on the verge of erupting. I knew confronting them would be perilous. They would deny everything, twisting the truth to their advantage. But I was tired of being manipulated, of watching them exploit our family without consequence. It was then I decided to confide in Ava. She had always been openly skeptical of William, and I knew she would stand with us to help expose the truth. Together, we would fight to reveal the reality of the situation, no matter the risk. When I laid out everything we had discovered, Ava was visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she sifted through the documents. "This is worse than I thought," she whispered, her eyes wide with alarm. "I knew William was up to no good, but I never imagined it went this deep." "We need to confront them," I declared, my voice firm with resolve. "We have to bring this to light. Grandfather and our family deserve better." Ava nodded, a fierce determination igniting in her eyes. "I'm with you, Michael. Whatever it takes, we'll ensure they pay for their actions." With Ava on board, we formulated a plan. We would gather the family, present the evidence, and confront them together. I knew it would be challenging. They would likely retaliate, attempt to deflect or deny everything. But I was prepared. For too long, I had allowed them to control the narrative and twist the truth for their own benefit. As I geared up for the confrontation, I felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with a sense of purpose that was both exhilarating and daunting. I was about to engage in a battle that could either tear our family apart or finally shine a light on the truth. The secrets I had unearthed not only shattered my illusions, but also clarified my mission: to stand up for what was right, regardless of the cost. I knew William and Henry would do everything to protect their secrets and maintain their control. But backing down was not an option. This was about more than just an inheritance. It was about justice, about honouring Grandfather's legacy and ensuring the truth prevailed. As I prepared for the showdown, I reviewed the evidence we had gathered, feeling a resolute calm settle over me. I was ready to confront them, ready to expose the lies and deceit that had long poisoned our family. No matter the outcome, I was committed to doing the right thing, to standing up for the family that had been wronged, to reclaiming the legacy rightfully ours. The moment I chose to delve deeper into the family's secrets, I knew I was stirring up trouble. William's sudden appearance at my apartment confirmed my suspicions. He stood in my doorway, anger thinly veiled behind a forced smile. "Michael, we need to talk," he said, stepping aside. William was not one to leave things to chance. His presence meant he knew I was close to the truth, and he was here to thwart my efforts. "I've heard you've been poking around, digging into things that don't concern you," he said as he settled into an armchair, trying to dominate the space. "It does concern me. It's about our family. Grandfather's will was altered, and I believe you manipulated him into it," I countered, my arms crossed, meeting his challenging gaze head-on. William's expression darkened momentarily before he regained his composure. "You're grasping at straws, Michael. There's nothing to find. Grandfather made his decision. Let it go." "Let it go?" I echoed, feeling a surge of anger. "You think I'm going to stand by while you steal what's rightfully ours?" "I've found enough evidence, William. Enough to know you didn't play fair. And I won't stop until everyone knows what you've done." He leaned forward, his voice lowering, trying to intimidate. "Listen, I'm giving you a chance to walk away. I'm willing to make it worth your while." He produced an envelope from his pocket, placing it on the table between us. $710,100, Michael. Take it and stop this nonsense. You could do a lot with that kind of money. I looked down at the envelope, repulsed. You think you can buy me off? I pushed the envelope back towards him. This isn't about money. It's about grandfather's legacy, about the truth. I'm not going to be another pawn in your game, William. For a moment, he seemed poised to lash out, his face twisted with anger. But then, he forced a smile, laughed bitterly, and warned, "Suit yourself, Michael, but don't say I didn't warn you. Keep pushing, and you'll regret it." He left, slamming the door behind him. His departure left me more determined. William would stop at nothing to protect his stolen inheritance, and I knew things were about to get more dangerous. But I refused to be intimidated. I had come too far to back down now. The next day, Ava pulled me aside at our regular coffee spot, her demeanour almost conspiratorial. "I need to talk to you," she said quietly, looking around cautiously. "I found some documents a while back, evidence of William's schemes, the blackmail. I kept them hidden because I was scared. You know what he's capable of. But I can't just sit back now, not after everything." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "I wasn't sure I could trust you," she admitted softly, her gaze flickering. "And I was scared of the fallout. But I can't watch him destroy what's left of this family anymore." I nodded, understanding the weight of her decision. Ava's bravery gave me renewed hope. "Show me what you've got," I said, my voice steady. She handed me a folder. As I flipped through the pages, detailing William's history of manipulation and how he exploited grandfather's vulnerable state, a cold fury settled in. "He used grandfather's condition against him," Ava whispered, her voice shaking. "He played on his fears, convinced him this was the only way to protect the family. It was all a lie." With this new information, a plan began to form. We needed to bring everything into the open, but not alone. We needed the family's support to expose William in a way that left no room for denial. "This weekend," I said, looking up at Ava with a sense of purpose, "we have our family gathering. It's the perfect chance to bring forward the evidence, lay everything out, and let the truth speak for itself. He won't be able to just talk his way out of this one." Ava nodded, her eyes alight with determination. "Let's do it. It's time we put an end to this." The days leading up to the gathering blurred with preparation and nerves. Brother Ava and I met regularly, poring over the evidence, rehearsing our presentation, and bracing ourselves for the inevitable confrontation. We knew William would attempt to deflect and paint himself as the victim, but we were ready. Armed with the truth, I felt a newfound sense of empowerment, a feeling that we could actually set things right. When the day of the gathering arrived, tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. Family members exchanged greetings, their smiles masking an underlying current of suspicion. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward to gather everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady but firm. "There are some things we need to discuss, important matters that have come to light since grandfather's passing." William shot me a warning glance, but I ignored him, focusing on the gathered family, the people I was determined to protect. I presented the documents, methodically outlining William's manipulations, his exploitation of our grandfather's vulnerability, and how he had reshaped the will in his favour. The room fell silent as I spoke, each piece of evidence resonating like a strike, gradually dismantling the facade William had so meticulously built. I could see the shock and realization in their eyes as they processed the depth of the deception, the trusted family member who had betrayed them. William attempted to interject, to spin the narrative in his favour, but his words faltered under the weight of the evidence. For the first time, he appeared vulnerable and exposed, his image crumbling. "This is ridiculous," he stammered, desperation seeping into his voice. You're all just jealous, trying to ruin me because you didn't get what you wanted. None of this proves anything." However, his protests were met with skepticism. The family was no longer swayed by his words. They turned against him, their simmering anger and sense of betrayal becoming palpable. "You've taken enough from us, William," Aunt declared, her voice thick with bitterness. "You've lied, you've manipulated, and now it's time you faced the consequences." Ava stepped forward, her gaze intense as she fixed it on William. "You can't control us anymore. We won't let you destroy this family. Not again." With that, William's facade completely shattered. He lashed out, hurling accusations and threats, but it was too late. The family had seen the truth of who he was, and there was no going back. A wave of relief washed over me as I realised we had won. We had broken free from his manipulative grasp. In the following days, we began the legal process to challenge the will and restore grandfather's original intentions. It was a difficult journey, fraught with legal battles, but I knew we were on the right path. The family came together, united in our determination to rebuild and heal from the wounds William had inflicted. For the first time in a long while, I felt a genuine sense of peace, a belief that we could move forward and reclaim the legacy that had been wrongfully taken from us. As I looked around at my family, at those who had stood by me and fought alongside me, I knew we would emerge from this ordeal stronger and more resilient, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The trial itself was grueling, testing our resolve at every turn. William and Henry, desperate to maintain their grip, did everything in their power to delay the proceedings and obscure the truth. Their legal team portrayed them as victims, claiming the accusations were baseless and the evidence circumstantial. Day by day, the courtroom bristled with tense exchanges and fervent testimonies. William and Henry, flanked by their lawyers, alternated between defiance and calculated composure, projecting confidence as if challenging anyone to dispute their version of the story. I could see the cracks beginning to show in their armour. The strain in their eyes was undeniable. William and Henry knew the truth was stacked against them, and, despite their attempts to appear confident, it was clear they were rattled. The prosecution was relentless, systematically dismantling their defences day by day. We presented all the evidence we had collected, the dubious financial records, the incriminating letters, and the damning testimonies from former business associates who had witnessed William and Henry's unscrupulous dealings. Each piece of evidence added significant weight to our case, and each witness testimony eroded the narrative they had tried to construct. One of the most damning moments came when Mr. James, an old accountant who had worked closely with my grandfather and was intimately familiar with the family's financial dealings, took the stand. He testified with quiet dignity, his steady gaze recounting the financial discrepancies he had noticed, odd transfers and unauthorized withdrawals that had initially raised alarm bells. "I raised these concerns with Mr. William," he said, referring to my grandfather, "but he assured me that everything was in order. I can only assume now that he was being misled." The defense tried to rattle him, suggesting he had misinterpreted the data or had a personal vendetta against William and Henry, but he remained unshakable. His testimony was a powerful moment that left a palpable impact on the jury. The tension escalated when William himself took the stand, hoping to sway the jury with his charm and a rehearsed air of innocence. He spun a tale of loyalty and family, portraying himself as a dutiful son and a misunderstood brother who had only wanted to protect the family legacy. His performance was almost convincing until the prosecutor began his cross-examination. "Mr. William," the prosecutor asked, his tone sharp, cutting through William's practiced demeanour, "can you explain why funds supposedly intended for family investments were diverted into private accounts under your name?" William shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of panic crossing his eyes before he regained his composure. "It was a temporary measure," he claimed, his voice trying to maintain steadiness. The family's finances